Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Did you see the updated Google sheet I sent last night?
I haven't looked at it yet, but I saw that you sent it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I also pulled out the other document that I referenced last night that we had only used for the funding and governance group. So I pulled that out and took the table and made that into a sheet too. And then on the document, I just put a hyperlink that it can connect it into the sheet for people to update there. But we might want to consider how many people are updating it. But yeah, just thoughts for later as we go.
Morning.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice group. How's it going, everybody? All right. There it is. All right, we'll get right into it. Matt and I have a meeting. Well, there's a meeting at 11 to 12 I'm going to try to hop onto, so I'm going to try to see if we can get through this. But if we can't, I will hang out, and I'm trying to see if I can join that. It's Reading related, of course. So hope everybody's good. We'll get right in. I know we've had a couple of meetings. It's been such a busy time. I don't get to pop into all the meetings, and so I get excited to hear what's going on. So we'll go right into the work group updates with either the staff liaison or the co-chairs, depending on who is present and would like to speak about what has been happening in each area. So we'll start with funding and governance. Haley, that can be you, or do we have, I can't see everybody who's here now. So if you,
Yeah, it looks like I don't see Eugene or Namdi, so
okay,
I can provide the update. So sorry, it's a little loud.
You're good.
We've been having internal meetings with the IPA staff and the co-chairs. And so this week we talked about, the funding and governance work group. We've been talking a lot about how do you do funding and governance. They're two huge topics. So we really sort of, I think have been narrowing. Sorry, my cat is jumping around in cardboard boxes.
Oh, that's funny.
I don't know if it's loud for you, but it's really loud for me. But so we've sort of have been kind of trying to figure out the best and most productive way to be that work group, So I think the co-chairs are really focusing on governance and then funding as it relates to governance. So not sort of those systemic funding topics that we've been talking about. We want Reading to address those, but not in the funding and governance work group right now.
Okay.
We've just been talking about working on that work plan that we've been talking about for a little bit, getting that really fleshed out. How do we work on governance, and how do we make it productive and also different than past efforts, even different than our own past efforts? How do we, actually get some traction in this?
No, and I have had some conversations with Namdi about it. Is that a sense that that's a time-bound priority, and that, excuse me, and wanting to get to the more systemic stuff down the road, or is there an expectation that there should be another? I think I'd had some conversation with Namdi about maybe there'd be sort of another wing or one of the other working group or something like that. Can you, where's that stand, that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we were talking about, we sort of made the funding and governance work group originally to address governance. So the membership is a little bit more geared towards governance issues. And we think if we really wanted to tackle funding, we would need to shift that around.
Okay, that's fair.
And I think, I know Aaron and I think Chuck, one of them is supposed to be on.
Aaron's running a little late. He texted me. He is planning to be here. We could always skip that and come back when he gets here.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, when he's here, maybe he could talk a little bit about it too. But I know we've been talking about maybe the settlement group possibly morphing into tackling some of those more systemic funding issues. That's one way we were thinking about it. And that's why I was emailing you and Carolyn to get a meeting about the funding and governance co-chairs and the settlement co-chairs to meet to really talk about this so we can get a good plan moving forward so that makes sense to everyone. Because it's, yeah, but I think also Nnamdi and Eugene are both interested and really invested in the governance piece of the work, and that seems to be where they want to go too. But we did also talk about how you do both. So I think it's
right. As topics, it's hard to have them living with each other because they're both so much, but it's also like you can't really live without each other either. They're both so intricately bound together that we have to figure out how to make sure that's a very integrated conversation, even if there's a couple different groups approaching it. So, okay, that's helpful. I know that's a work in progress, and that was exactly where we said we wanted to be, kind of January, February, was to work that out.
Haley, does that mean their focus is on the referendum, or that's moving possibly to the settlement group?
No, the referendum, thank you for reminding me, that's also an update. That's been happening a little bit more just behind the scenes. We're waiting for Nnamdi to meet with the House attorneys to get an updated version of the referendum bill that has incorporated the updates that we heard, like feedback that we heard from community members and from consortium members and work group members. So we're kind of waiting on the next iteration of that bill. And then hopefully that will go out to the work group members for another round of feedback. But I'm not sure, I don't think we're going to focus meetings on referendum reform moving forward. I think it's going to be a little bit more probably an email communication. That's what I think.
Okay, so for that work group, are we still going to vote again on the next round of recommendations or edits to the bill like we did?
I'm not entirely sure. We can talk through that process, any feedback people have too about what that process should look like. I'm sure Nnamdi and Eugene would be open to how we think we should get to that final version of the bill.
So in terms of an update for next week's meeting, are we it sounds like there's not necessarily a fully resolved path forward for that work group, and the main thing is, really the main follow-up is just what we talked about in December. We gave them clearance, to keep working on developing a referendum bill, and that's what's happening. So I guess, would that be the most substantive update that we can expect, or do you think, I don't want to confuse folks too much about where it is until we really know where it's going?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to be able to say that we're, focused on governance moving forward, but I don't want to overstep and say that if you're not comfortable with that, if we haven't solidified the funding piece or the systemic funding issues and how we're going to address those.
I think it would be okay if if that is the clear, and I know that was sort of a baton that we kind of left sitting and need to pick it up again. So if that's the priority for, whatever, I don't know if we want to put a time span on that so people kind of have a sense of expectations that this is going to be the immediate priority to come back to this conversation. I think that's fine. And to say that the systemic funding conversation is still in the work plan, I think we do need soon to be able to offer a path forward on how that's going to be operationalized.
I agree.
I think we could certainly say that here's what the priority has been decided upon with the composition of this body, this sub working group as it is. It makes the most sense to be doing XYZ for the next, 3 to 6 months. I think that's fine, but I think we can acknowledge that, we're working on figuring out what is the best strategy on the funding thing, because I think that is important. And I know that settlement is talking about it. So maybe that will help us have an answer there, but I don't know if we'll be able to have a real answer before next Thursday, but yeah.
And I'm just scrolling through the people here too. Chris or Kelly can also weigh in too if they think they can add any clarifying information about the funding and governance, sort of where we are too. No pressure, but feel free to add.
So I apologize. I was a little late, so I didn't hear all of your remarks, Haley. But again, and I apologize if I repeat what Haley just said, but I think the, through the conversation, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in looking at the governance options and then some of the funding ramifications that can come through with that. And by talking about governance, you're going to bring up some of those systemic funding issues as far as, whether it be related to capital or whether it be related to resources for high concentrations of students in poverty or high concentrations of EL students. So it kind of, by going through that conversation, you could kind of view it as issue identification, although those issues have been identified multiple times by multiple groups over the years. But it can kind of help clarify, and maybe by the work we're going through with governance, we can tee up some of those issues for whether it be that working group or another, newly created working group to really dive into those issues in further detail. So that would probably, in my opinion, kind of be a way that we could address that. I think the concern is it's just really difficult for that working group, which has a lot of the people that may be talking about funding, particularly from a Newcastle County perspective, to touch on both topics at once. And it's kind of, you want to get through one before you get into the next one, because either one on their own is a bear to handle. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think we've had the conversation before. I think it makes sense to do it sequentially. I think ultimately when we start implementing solutions that we hopefully can have adopted, that they have to start to align at some point, so we do need to, we need to figure out how do we do that sequentially so that we ultimately have solutions on both fronts that work together and coalesce so that we actually are doing things properly. And I know that that's going to be a little bit of a moving target in, actually figuring that out. But I am, happy to know that's what the co-chairs have been focusing on as we ask them to. And it sounds like they've at least settled on where to begin in terms of priorities. And that gives us room to continue to figure out how do we, how now do we fit that sort of next piece in the conversation, the systemic funding. And so Chris, definitely will be looking to you, I think, a lot to figure out what do you think that looks best.
Okay.
Maybe you can give guidance to those co-chairs or the other co-chairs that may want to take that on, or if we decide we need another ad hoc, however we decide to do it. So I know you are already thinking about it, but
yeah, definitely. And one other thing to keep in mind is last time we went through this process as far as a governance plan, we did that fiscal impact analysis.
Yeah.
But one thing we didn't necessarily do was start to figure out the solutions to those shortfalls. And that may be an opportunity to really start to talk about some of these systemic funding issues where you say, there's an $11 million shortfall as far as local revenue. If you were to absorb these students, what's the solution that could be replicated statewide to address that? It works for the city of Wilmington. So I think by examining some of these governance issues or these potential governance changes, it's going to make these issues real, because you're going to start to see price tags. And I think that really kind of fixates people on potential solutions. So I think there's a path forward. It's just, we've got to continue to refine and clarify. So.
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds like maybe that initial, I think Haley, you said something about that initial work plan that we had, which went into a lot of things. Maybe it sounds like maybe we can start to morph that into something a little bit more strategic based on what you're saying, Chris, kind of talk about the whens and the hows of how that'll actually play out. Because for me, it's just helpful to know when to expect we're going to touch on something. And it is just a matter of when, not if, I think, for a lot of these topics, but and what makes the most sense. So that's really helpful, you guys. I know it's a lot, so I really appreciate how you've been digging in. And I know Namdi and Nadine are so busy, as are we all. So thank you for keeping it moving. Okay, social determinants. I don't know if we have either chair, but I know we have some work group members. Sorry, Jeff.
I'm here. Sorry, I was driving and I'm parked now, but I'm good to go. We had our first meeting. We had a meeting last night, and we're beginning our strategic advocacy planning, as well as our strengthening our own understanding of the subcommittees that we had. I think in March, we're looking to have New Moors share with the group some things around elementary wellness centers, just to kind of strengthen our understanding of the work that's been going on in the various subgroups. That's in the interest of brevity. That's probably that's my update. Jason might have more, or Ray if she's on. They might want to share more. But it was a healthy meeting just to get regrouped and organized in those two directions.
Great. Is Ray here? Jason, and I think Dawn wanted to report out on something as well. I don't see Ray or Jason.
I have nothing to add, but I know Dawn did want to speak.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to let you know that Representative Williams, I don't see her on the call, but she has drafted the developmental screening bill that is part of our recommendations. And we've had stakeholders review it, and it has been sent to, she sent it to Emily Cunningham over at the Department of Education to review and provide feedback, because I know it's something she wants to file fairly soon after JFC.
That's good. So those will be good updates, I think, for next week. I think, what I'd like the work group, what I'd like the work groups to do is, essentially we approved interim recommendations. So to the extent that there's any updates on action on those things, I think that'll be excellent for folks to hear. And then of course, path forward stuff in terms of, we've regrouped and we're considering, these aspects of, how we move forward. I think those will be really useful updates for the February 18th meeting. Agreed? Good. All right, nicely done. Sorry I couldn't attend the meeting. That gets frustrating when I can't do that. All right, Erin, your timing is perfect. I just got to you on the list. So settlement seems like it's been busy. So give us an update.
Settlement has been busy. We're so excited to be here. We have approved our scope in our last meeting, so that was exciting. And every member of the settlement committee believes that we should accept the settlement. The Reading Commission should accept the settlement as a starting point. So we'd like to push that recommendation to everyone. And then we looked at 3 bills, which are SB 56, which is focused on the opportunity funding. We also focused on the HB 86, K3 Spec Ed, and HB 100, which is focused on mental health, adding more support there. A lot of these are already sponsored by some people on this call. And so we're very excited about that. One of the pieces for these SB 56, there were, for every one of our bills, we want to support them and would like to have the Reading Commission also support them as a whole.
That could be like the healthiest discussion of the meeting for sure, to really be able to present those and talk about that.
Yeah, and we think it also it comes under the settlement because they are about the settlement.
Yeah.
Each of these areas though, and I wanted to talk at this group, there were some suggestions for them. I don't know if that's a conversation we just have here only, or if it's a conversation we also put out with everyone else. It's up to you. The pieces that were there were for SB 56. One of these suggestions was that there should be more community involvement. And so that would include on the ground parents, students, and community members and teachers to also provide oversight as an addition to SB 56. For HB 86, all in favor. We had some questions around the fiscal note. One of our members mentioned that Tika was actually on this call. There should be a focus on an ombudsman that has a knowledge of special education for HB 86. And then Chuck had mentioned that we should also look at the divisions that we're using. So there's also more oversight for the increase in special education. So as we are increasing special education, that we also increase the oversight for that and have the units to go along with that. The last one was for HB 100. Again, the focus was on looking at Division 2 and 3 units as well as Division 1 for the continued oversight. So we are increasing for House Bill 100. It's a focus on social worker and a counselor and a psychologist, numbers of 250 and then 700. That also would provide more people. The request was to look at also having support for administration. Again, our members didn't all vote on these recommendations. They were recommendations that came out of the group. We did vote to approve. These are just some of the suggestions. One other thing to note is that for SB 56, for opportunity funding, the opportunity funding is broken down to some flex spending as well as to mental health funding. One of the issues is that if we add HB 100, which we all believe we should, the opportunity funding has been spent on social workers and counselors and psychologists. So that means that the mental health portion of SB 56, some of that will be taken away. I was speaking with Dr. Bunting about that yesterday, who also talked about how the settlement is set up where you couldn't necessarily just take that away. And so it's not something to take it away, but a conversation about, is there more flexibility that could be had to offset that? So if you're already spending opportunity funding on a counselor, great. HB 100 comes along. I don't think the go-to should be that we are providing more just PD or buying textbooks and workbooks, but that how can this be better used in a substantial way for the school, at the same time doing that without ruining the settlement. So that was all.
Yes, it's a lot. Okay, it's good to know the direction that's going. I think this isn't so much for the work group to consider, but maybe for us to think about in terms of outreach, planning. You know, we obviously launched our ask for our funding recommendations that we approved in December, which constitute about a $15 to $20 million ask in the fiscal year 22 budget. And obviously, I think we are connected to and supportive of the other asks as well. So I think might be good to be thinking about how do we advocate together with others. Essentially, my concern would be, you know, we want to have a strong coalition that wants to do all of these things for kids, as opposed to fighting against each other for limited resources. So I think that's something I'd love everyone just to keep in mind, just to think about. I don't know, I think it's too soon to say, let's think about prioritizing amongst all of the fiscal note, you know, things will be ultimately be fiscal noted. Because that was actually a question that I fielded at the press conference last week, you know, how would you prioritize even amongst our own recommendations, let alone the other ones we want to support? So I'm just going to put that in the minds of members, just as a, you know, and this is really probably maybe a better conversation for the full work group meeting than the planning meeting, but just to bear in mind that I think that's an angle that we might want to consider being prepared to address when we talk about all of these things at our meeting next week, just because I think these are all going to be strong asks to do exactly what we said we want to do, go beyond the settlement, and be prepared to hopefully, you know, have this strong coalition asking for all of these things to all happen. So just food for thought.
And to add to that, Tizzy, and we also, some of what we have already recommended does align with some of the settlement stuff.
Yeah.
The settlement. And we do have a chart we can share at the meeting that shows, all right, here's what we've recommended, here's where it aligns with the settlement, like our teacher recruitment and retention, and some of the social determinants work group. So that could be helpful in kind of showing how some of it merges together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Is
Tika,
there
go
an
ahead.
option? No worries. Is there an option in that chart to have another column for like opportunities? So for instance, like with House Bill 100, so that wasn't something originally there, but it's something that does go with it.
Mm-hmm. I can look into it, see if I can figure that out. Yeah.
Or
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I think it'd be wonderful for us to be able to think through, you know, why these align. I think it's great to have that conversation next week. It'll be really interesting to see what how the full consortium responds to that recommendation. But just in terms of planning, it might be good to start thinking about how do we present, why this is a united front of priorities and expenditures, if that's something from a research perspective, from a analysis perspective that we can be doing, I think that would be helpful. I don't know if we can do that for next week's meeting, but maybe just to start thinking about, so that after next week's meeting, when we really get a sense of what concerns, and hopes are from our members, we can act on that quickly.
Just one side note, one caveat. So the the settlement group is actually a very wide array of thoughts and ideas and different interests. It's great to see them combine in forces like Voltron. The other thing was that the recommendations that people made, every group member that made recommendations did not want that to be at the peril of the SB 56, HB 86, and HB 100. So they were recommendations, but if they couldn't be considered, nobody wanted to sink a bill. Just FYI.
Got it.
New Year to everybody. It's the year of the ox. Enjoy.
Okay.
And are we okay? I'm going to jump in real quick. At the meeting next week, is it okay if the work group asks the consortium to, I guess we're talking about motioning to support the settlement as a baseline and support these bills as baselines that we could build upon in future? That's something we can do?
I think, yeah, I think every working group is in a position to make a recommendation for action from the full body. And I think just we need to be prepared to make the case, to make sure that, the settlement, as I think we've talked about, settlement work group is sort of our brain on the settlement. And so we need to make sure that we're able to explain what the settlement working group now understands about the settlement and your scope, obviously, of why, to get to equity means to go beyond it. And then to be able to, just describe why that motion is being made and garner, in order to garner support for passage. So, I think as long as you're prepared to make that case and sort of facilitate a discussion on it, then I don't think, I think a motion is the right of any co-chair, really any member, to make at any time. So, yeah, I'm not trying to squelch any action.
As long as Erin's okay with that, I'm good with it.
We're an action-oriented body, you guys. That's what we've been saying. That's what we are. So this is the time. This is the time for action.
Wait till you guys see how we change the unit count at our next meeting.
Oh God. Okay, now you're giving me palpitation.
So at future meetings, we're going to have other members of the work group or recommended people from the work group come and speak towards, okay, we have opportunity funding now, what? How else could we either change or coalesce it, make it better? So,
okay,
see where that goes.
I think that's, my sense is that's where, a lot of the action is going to be in terms of report outs and for this meeting. I don't know if anyone else thinks so, but just in terms of getting to our agenda, I'm thinking, and I think I can even see it represented on the agenda next. I think this is where the bulk of our conversation is going to focus. Anything on the educators work group? Or Erin, are you good? Yeah, you're very good. Okay. Educators work group, anything?
I think they're just waiting to hear where they need to help or push through anything. I think Representative Smith, I don't want to speak for him, but is looking, I think, at some of the workforce side of it, but I'm not sure.
So really just about the two pieces that belong to the educators work group that are in our recommendations. I think at this point, our expectation of them would be to, particularly on Representative Smith's side, to get into advocacy mode to get that done, to work with me to get that done. So I know the educators isn't meeting and necessarily reporting out. So we may not even need an educators report out, or do we?
I would just say maybe if you could, when we go into the work group updates, like introduce it, we're going to touch on the three that are currently meeting. Educators has presented, and however you want to word that. They're not meeting right now, but the recommendations we're trying to push through.
Okay, sounds good. I think, and to that point, now that we're moving into the agenda, what time is it? 11. Okay. I think we should order the work group updates, kind of going from like least to report to most to report and discuss. So and anyone can feel free to chime in and push back on this. This is just, I'm just going stream of consciousness here, but I think we might start with educators, and then you know, I think in terms of complexity of what might need to be discussed, I think social determinants update. And then, because those are both, you know, have delivered on recommendations, and the update is just sort of maybe in terms of advocacy and legislation, and, you know, the push for to fund the different initiatives we recommended. And then, and then funding and governance, which I think is a little bit more of a nuanced, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's the path forward here? Might garner more questions. And then I think settlement, particularly because there's going to be a motion we're expecting, I think we should put last so that we can just kind of stick with it. That's anyone else have any thoughts in terms of just agenda order?
I think that makes sense. I do have a question or comment maybe for some future meetings as we're moving through with the work. And we just talked about how we've made recommendations and we're moving to those action pieces, and some of our things need to get approved legislatively or have fiscal notes. But sometimes I find that when recommendations kind of go to die, it's on the other side, and it's from the technical assistance piece. So for instance, if, you know, for like the educators group, we made all these recommendations, and now LEA maybe says, oh, I have units for this, or how best can I use them, or how do I make this work? I know Dawn is really great at talking through different ways. She always talks about Medicaid, other ways we can use Medicaid, but really thinking about once some of these recommendations are up and running, being technical assistance for LEAs and other people that want to utilize our recommendations, but just kind of don't know where to start or how to navigate, or just need some assistance and best practices. Mm-hmm. So that might be a direction maybe for the work groups beyond. So educators is kind of just, they've done their recommendations and now they're sitting there. Maybe the future work as they start to roll out is the technical assistance for LEAs and the community agencies.
I think that's a great observation. I think, you know, something we talk about or have talked about in the beginning, or, you know, I guess it's even in our mandate, is about, you know, obviously we're recommending state level policy, but also coordination on the district level. And I'm not sure we've really leaned into what that means and looks like and what our capacity is to do that.
Well, when I think about us doing things different, and it just kind of brings me back to Obamacare. And when they say, you know, you gave people Obamacare, but you didn't tell them how to use it, or people aren't using it to the best of its benefit because they don't really know how. So with some of these recommendations, really working with folks that, how can we help you best utilize some of these options? And I can tell you from like the front lines, there's a million things going on, especially now in schools. And so you don't always have the time to look through all of your different options and figure out the best. So if they could have some support in that, and especially as some of these things are getting up and running, I think that would probably be helpful and might spur a little bit different of an outcome and then some of the ways we presented these things in the past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have a reaction or thoughts on that? Dawn?
Tika, your point of having technical assistance is valid. I can't say enough about that. So when we've looking at early childhood, when we've had a variety of initiatives, having the technical assistance to be able to ensure that programs are set up for success. It's really about programs often are not able to implement the recommendations because they need the support. And so if we present it that way of ensuring that schools, educators, administration, et cetera, can be successful in implementation. That's very powerful. And I don't know if, I don't think Terry Lawler's on the call, but I look at the kind of work that Terry has done regarding social emotional learning and equity, and DOE Secretary Bunting's on the call. You know, a lot of that, our work around SEL, DOE has implemented professional development and made sure that's been available for educators over the past couple of years to make sure that we can be successful and we're all speaking the same language. And we still have work to do, but by having that statewide support, it's been really impactful.
Is that?
So whether it's through PDMS, you know, whether it's through professional development, whether it's through, you know, looking at staff within the department who can offer, you know, technical assistance. So for ECAP programs in early childhood, there are 2 staff members at DOE who provide us with technical assistance if we need help with understanding a requirement. So how could existing staff be able to provide the technical assistance, or it could be funding new positions or short-term contractors to provide technical assistance for the first year or 2.
So my question, just to be mindful of time and planning meeting, I would love to think, I think it sounds like it's a great item sort of for our wish list of proposals or you know, coming up with a solution for, and I'm kind of wondering, where does it fit into the scope of work? Is there a current place in our structure where this would be a discussion for development and getting somewhere with it? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm trying to think if there's somewhere where this makes sense to be placed as a, you know, as a proposal for development.
I think it could definitely be an upcoming conversation, maybe first through planning and then maybe through the committees. But I started trying to put together a tool because I'm on a couple different work groups just to kind of see, okay, so this was the scope of this one and this is, you know, here. But then as we were going forward, like to Dawn's point about Terry Lawler's group with SEL, I actually sit on that group too. And we went through and we did crosswalks and toolkits. And so within those, we kind of made similar to the way the social determinants group is too, sort of small subcommittees that focused on specific pieces of it that we then brought back. So I would think maybe something like that within our specific groups of gathering, you know, frequently asked questions or the other assistance pieces, but then going forward, maybe having those same little groups be where, how Dawn said, there was 2 people she could call to technical assistance. If I'm working as maybe I'm in a childcare center and I want to take advantage of one of these opportunities that we have put through and now is coming to fruition, but I'm not really sure how to navigate it, maybe then we have somewhere where it's like, you know, the technical assistance group is actually the early childhood group of social deterrence or something like that. I think it's getting in the weeds a little bit to talk about in future, but I do think that there's some ways we could structure to at least try.
I think that's something maybe we should put on our agenda to figure out how that fits. Haley made a good point about, you know, the plans to sort of actualize, operationalize it like we saw with educators, which had these very clear sort of accountability and support responsibilities. But I think if we could maybe make that something that we can revisit in this agenda, as Tika said, in this meeting, to figure out where to keep talking through how to fit this in, would be a good idea. So Haley, can we incorporate this into our agenda for further discussion?
Yes.
I knew you'd say yes.
I can share with you too the tool that I've been working on to try and keep things organized in my own head.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, Still on the agenda. Was someone interjecting? Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you. Okay.
I have a question about the agenda, but I don't want to go ahead of it. If you wanted to kind of like step by step go through it.
Let's finish it real quick. I think we just sort of reordered. We just sort of flipped the order of the work group updates, and I didn't hear any objections. So it sounds like that's what we're going to do. And then I agree with the question here on, bullet 3, which is we don't need a separate line item for that. It's really just like each work group. I mean, if other work groups have something on that front that they want to address, I mean, I would assume planning and governance is going to talk about the status of the referendum bill. I would, if social determinants and educators want to talk about specific, I think that they should feel free. So I don't think we need a separate item. It sounds like it's just going to work its way into the work groups, and that seems more elegant to me. So then, okay, that's kind of it for what we have for the agenda. So Haley, what was your question?
My question is about going back to the settlement. So bullet 2 and then sub bullet 1 and then D. What does it mean if the consortium takes a position? Like, I'm just wondering, like, so if we vote to endorse, the Senate and the House bills, and also the settlement as a floor, what is that like? I know that it's a public statement of our support, and that is worth its own thing. But I'm just wondering, like, does there need to be something else related to it? Some sort of public announcement that we endorse these things, or like, I guess if I was a consortium member, I would be thinking, okay, what does my vote mean? Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
My assumption, and I would love to hear from others on what they think. I think if we take a position to support a bill, that should be written up and shared with legislators, would be my, and the public, obviously. I would think that we would put that in writing if we agree to take a position on something. Yeah, that's where my mind goes. Basically, we write a letter. Thank you, Aaron, for that thumbs up. Basically, yeah, we agree we're in a support or an opposition position. We don't know. Yeah, we need to have proof of that, and that should be on our website, on our social media, distributed to the logical recipients of that information, such as legislators.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. That's a good question. We should never assume things. That does. Okay. Where are we? Oh, okay. Yes. JFC hearing. Did we, this is obviously a great opportunity to talk about the outreach on our recommendations. And that sort of predates our conversation on the 18th. So I think it gives us a wonderful opportunity to reinforce what we did last Friday with the presentation of our recommendations, to really make sure that that's getting in front of JFC members, although quite a few of us were on that call. But so have we informed consortium members that hearing is coming up and encouraging? We did that already, right? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Maybe
I can do that again. I'll probably send out another email reminding people of the meeting next week, and I can send another link to the JFC meeting.
Right, and I might reattach the one sheet about a recommendation there and just say, we could really use voices speaking to this. If you are so moved, I think that would be, obviously we presented this to the public because we want to move forward with these recommendations we agreed upon as consortium. We need to keep following through on that to make sure that support is clear. At this point, because we don't have a meeting as a consortium to agree that we have a consortium position. I mean, we do have a position. We support these, but I mean, if I guess I think it would be incumbent upon individual members to go and make that statement as opposed to an official reading letter on it, because that's sort of, we did that. We did the press conference. I'm a co-chair and I'm on the committee, and I think it would be better to hear more personally from individuals in the consortium or the public to talk about those. Oh, great. Tika's already registered. Wow, you are on it. So yeah, the registration link is important to share, reinforce with the memo so people know what their talking points are, and just encourage them to, this is an opportunity to take action as a member of our action-oriented body, and I think we should not miss it. Yep.
I see Secretary Bunting has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The time has changed to 12:30.
Oh, it does shift.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't think the text. I'm like, I'll be there no matter what. So let's make sure folks know when to be there so they don't end up sitting through hours of things and getting frustrated and leaving and not making a comment. But great.
Also,
and of course, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say last night on the social determinants meeting, Senator Sikola suggested also people putting in written statements as well.
I was just about to say that. Let's make sure they have the email address so folks know if they can't show up or they end up not being able to stay, that they can send that email to that email address, which is also there on the agenda.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that should help people. And, I think that could get cross-posted to social media as well. Maybe just letting people know there's an opportunity. I think it's good just to let people know that there's an opportunity to talk about public education in front of joint finance. They may not want to go comment about us. They may have their own things to go comment about. And we want to encourage people to engage. So, okay. Is that helpful? Does that give us a clear plan?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay. Great.
Go. Should we state that we're with Reading so we get 3 minutes instead of 2? Or should we do it as personal and do the
Although
2?
I think that it will only work for one person.
Okay.
Correct.
I didn't know how many other people had plans.
So I would encourage folks to be ready to get your point out in 2 minutes, because as a body, we can't just have 3 people. I don't think, but 3 people all say Reading and expect 3 minutes. So
they're cutting people off at that too. I've been watching some of them.
Zoom makes it a lot harsher of a cutoff for sure. But I would just try to keep it 2 minutes. And I think it's more powerful if folks speak as individuals based on, the roles that you have as a parent, as an educator. I always find that I find that particularly interesting to hear from people. So, but yeah, I would just say try to err on the shorter side. Or at least put your most important points at the top so that when they cut you off, you don't lose anything. But then you can send an email anyway. So that's helpful. Public engagement, who has an update?
So Alexis and I have an update if there's time. We have been working on a Reading newsletter to kind of just make sure, if we're thinking maybe possibly once a month or once every 2 months, or sort of before our next big, before each consortium meeting, that we could send it out. We have like a draft that we can all look at together. I can share my screen if everyone wants to look at it and provide just some initial feedback.
Mm-hmm. And
Alexis, feel free to jump in, because she did a ton of work on this and it looks amazing because she made it look amazing.
Yay, Alexa.
Yeah, just feedback. And I know I have a vision for it. I want to definitely highlight members that are doing amazing things. So if you have something that you want to add on the newsletter, because we want to increase engagement, that's the whole purpose. Mm-hmm. Just send me something or send Haley something and we'll just find ways to make this super engaging. I know Senator Lockman, you asked me to look into texting platforms. I have been researching. I just need to figure it out a little bit more before I explain it, or the ways we can do it. But yes, I do have that on the list. So yeah, just feedback is really helpful. And also if you want to, I know Dawn does a lot of outside work, or Tiki does a lot of outside work. So if you have an event that you want to highlight, that would be a good way to increase our newsletter email list. So just let me know if you want something included, of course, after it's approved by the consortium.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea to sort of spotlight the other affiliations and work of our members. I love that. We scroll down and see.
Yeah, I was just waiting. I wanted to. So we have this. Can everyone see it okay?
Yeah.
I know it's like in my email, but I thought that was the best way to show people. In MailChimp, it doesn't look as like
email background.
Thanks. Whimsical.
Now, where do the addresses pull into MailChimp? So would people register on our website to get the newsletter?
So if you scroll all the way down, well, wait. So
initially, how would I get a newsletter?
Since you're on our consortium email list, you will get one. So I have like a full list of people who get my normal emails.
Mm-hmm.
We have a MailChimp list of the same emails, and so everyone will get them.
And then there also will be the subscription form link on the website too. So you can click on the website and say subscribe to email.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is just our little title here, launches first newsletter. We highlighted a picture of Reading and put a blurb for Black History Month because we wanted to note that it's February, it's important. And we scrolled down. So we're sort of thinking these headings will probably remain pretty consistent. So consortium news, what's going on. So we let people know about the press briefing. We link to all the pertinent things. Interim recommendations, press release, press conference, which is up on YouTube.
Looks nice.
It does.
Thanks.
We should add all legislators to the
very visually appealing,
right?
The legislators will get it. We have they're on the list.
They're on the mailing list. Excellent. So I think it's just nice to get that semi-regular, touch point, and then have it populate to the Facebook and that kind of thing, or have the sign up. Definitely maybe do a post on encouraging folks to sign up because I know we have some folks who are already on the email list, but then I think we have followers on the Facebook page who are newer to our conversation who might want to get on there. So I think that would be really helpful. And then the other thing which I think is kind of connected to some public engagement conversations we've had before is, I know we create like graphics for our social media. I think we should make sure, and Tika, this was something I think you brought up before, that maybe some of our partners, is it the Urban League? Is it the Coalition for 100 Black Women? Is it, WCAC, other groups that we work with and are represented on the body, that they can take that graphic, share it, graphic and link, so that we can be getting more stuff out there on, other platforms like Instagram or Twitter or whatever, without us as a consortium having to start a Twitter or an Instagram. I know that, that takes a lot of work to establish, maintain, and build a following. And I don't think we have the capacity to do that, but we do have partners. That's the reason we have a body of all these great people. So we should just keep in mind, this is exactly where we want to drive people and where the good content is, but we have to make sure that we're driving people to it. Just simplified, but some compelling driver to get people to sign up, and or whenever one comes out, that we have an easy link that pulls them back in from those other platforms. Does that make sense?
Haley, have you guys thought about how often you want to publish it?
I was thinking it would probably be every 2 months, sort of on par with with each consortium meeting.
Is that how often we meet? Every 2 months, or is it monthly?
Every 2 months.
Wow, it seems like so much more.
Well, because of the work group meetings, it's constant.
The work group meetings are constant, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're together every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're just planning, the substance is in there.
I'm welcome to feedback, but it takes a little while to get all the content together and then for it to be accurate. Every month sounds like it's a lot of time, but if to go through the approval process, and we want to make sure people see it, the information's accurate, before every consortium meeting is a good goal. And if we can do it more frequently, then we should, but I think that would be a good goal starting out.
Okay. I say that because Tizzy said that we wanted to drive people here, which I still think was a good idea. But if this isn't going to be the most regularly updated, I don't know if we want to. So I still think it's a good place to point people, but I don't know that you want to point them there for the most accurate news if it's only put out every 2 months. you see what I'm saying?
So would you suggest a monthly newsletter?
That I think that might be more appropriate.
Okay.
But I don't know what all that entails on your end.
Mm-hmm.
I think during session, especially, it might be good because people are paying more attention, especially when legislatively related.
Okay.
And I think if you guys think monthly, you guys are the consortium, so we'll figure it out, definitely. So no worries, I agree.
And we can revisit if that seems like too burdensome on our capacity, but I think that is a good goal.
Okay.
Once you get them started too, it might not seem as cumbersome because you're just pulling information from the work group stuff that's already being sent to you. So it's just kind of like a copy and paste type of thing.
Yeah. Sounds good. And I definitely will email co-chairs if they have specific things. So if you guys let me know what you want on the newsletter, that will definitely help speed along the process to get it out quicker.
Yeah. And if as a segue to then, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
I was gonna say, I can help make sure that my work groups get information to you. And on that end, just give me deadlines.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a plan.
And I'll get them from Aaron and Chuck.
Sounds good. And, of course, we can incorporate our video content as we get to that point, which is my segue to the next part of the agenda. And so I know, we're working on developing that. I think we had some conversation coming off of the press conference about having more folks do testimonials. I'm not sure where we are in terms of getting folks signing up to do that. But that might be a good use of our short video efforts in the short term, if that's something that we think we can, we can do. I know we're soliciting them. I've talked to, obviously the Senate staff that supported the press conference are aware of that as a priority too. So maybe that is like a collaborative point. Maybe I can drop Jason, maybe I can connect you with them and we can sort of make sure that we're on the same page about that. Because I think in the next couple of weeks, next month, whatever, that would probably be a great focus for video content.
Yeah, sounds great. That came up actually at our work group meeting last night too. They wanted to start doing that too. So yeah, all for it. Absolutely.
All right, perfect.
Came up at ours too.
Oh, good. All right, then see, you guys are ahead of me. So just let me know what you need in terms of being connected with corresponding staff. That so we can just make that stuff happen. So maybe we have some action on it to at least production action to report next week. Does that sound good? All right. What did we miss? Anything? Good.
We also talked last night about when folks were suggesting testimonies, but also organizing what piece they want to speak around. So it's not like 10 videos, everyone speaking to the same thing, but trying to spread it out a little bit.
And Jason, is that something that you can kind of marshal in terms of just keeping it like an organized and complementary set of voices if you're managing that project?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that'd be great. So then we'll consider Jason the point person to make sure that we're getting the right set of voices and that it's not just a bunch of duplication. Sounds good. All right. Well, anyone else? If not, we'll move into public comment. I'm looking. Okay. All right. Great, everybody. I'm always excited by what we're doing. And so I'll just look for hands for anyone who'd like to offer a 3-minute, 3-minute comment. Anyone? Oh, okay. Is that Amy?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think as always, you guys are really gaining momentum and it's really exciting. And I think by attending the JFC recently and seeing a trend and a pattern in the budget and hearing you guys talk about governance and funding and shortfalls, that definitely coincides with the reality of our situation, the funding discrepancies and having that revenue source in the budget to do all the things that you guys, and just plainly that needs to be done. And I think, like, when I listen to you guys, it seems like it goes in the circle of you getting the big picture down to the granular, like putting it all together. And then I'm just like, isn't this what the DOE is supposed to be doing? Isn't this what our like governor's administration is supposed to be like really leading the way? And I just think the elephant is in the room is that they are not, and they're not. And there's this kind of what I've discovered is there's this unspoken, I think, like communication in the administration that these different leaders aren't supposed to ask for things because the revenue source isn't there. So I called Jim Simmons like 6 times to get to the bottom of why no budget was turned in for the Office of Innovation and Equity. And it's because he was told that he couldn't turn it in. No new line items. Didn't matter if he was a new organization. He thought that turning in a budget would be adversarial. That's what he said. And that blows my mind. And I heard it also at JFC with the housing director, Ben Aditi. Why did he only ask for $1 million for SRAP? Because he's a team player. Doesn't matter if it didn't meet the need. If 3 million would meet the need, he could only ask. And this is kind of, I don't know how it's communicated in the administration, if it's verbal, if it's by email, if it's but it is being communicated. And without that advocate from West End Neighborhood House, Paul, speaking up and asking, why don't you ask for enough budget to cover the need, that would have never come out.
Thank you. 3 minutes, Amy. Thank you. Okay, we have more public comment. Okay, all right. I think we are covered for today. And thank you everybody for your constant contributions and ideas. And we'll keep working. Next week's gonna be fun. All right, have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Bye, thanks.
Happy Valentine's Day.
See you later.